The year 1948 irrevocably altered the landscape of Palestine. The war that engulfed the region left a wake of destruction and displacement, redrawing borders and shattering lives. The echoes of conflict reverberated across the newly formed State of Israel and the surrounding Arab nations. A fragile armistice held, but the embers of unresolved grievances smouldered, threatening to ignite further conflict. The 1949 Armistice Agreements, signed between Israel and its Arab neighbors, carved out new boundaries, solidifying territorial gains and losses. The Green Line, a demarcation born of conflict, became the de facto border, separating Israel from the Jordanian-controlled West Bank and the Egyptian-administered Gaza Strip. Jerusalem, a city sacred to three faiths, found itself divided, a microcosm of the broader fragmentation. The armistice, however, was not a peace treaty. It was a ceasefire, a temporary pause in hostilities. The underlying issues that fueled the conflict remained unaddressed. The refusal of Arab states to recognize Israel and the unresolved status of Palestinian refugees ensured that the region remained a tinderbox, poised for future conflagration. The unresolved issues cast a long shadow over the region, shaping the political landscape for decades to come. The 1948 war resulted in a humanitarian catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from their homes. This mass exodus, known as the Nakba, became a defining moment in Palestinian history. The refugees sought refuge in neighboring countries, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. They lived in overcrowded refugee camps, enduring hardship and uncertainty. The UNRWA was established to provide assistance and support to these displaced populations. The right of return became a central issue in the Arab-Israeli conflict. Generations of Palestinians have grown up in refugee camps, clinging to the hope of returning to their ancestral homes. The displacement and dispossession experienced by Palestinians during the Nakba fueled the growth of Palestinian nationalism. The loss of their homeland forged a collective identity and a shared sense of purpose. Palestinian nationalism emerged as a powerful force, demanding an end to Israeli occupation and the establishment of a Palestinian state. In 1964, the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, was founded, uniting various Palestinian factions. The PLO quickly became the dominant representative of the Palestinian people, advocating for their rights on the international stage. The dust settled on the battlefields of 1948, leaving behind a landscape scarred by war. The 1949 Armistice Agreements sought to establish a fragile peace, drawing lines in the sand. The Green Line, a demarcation born of conflict, separated Israel from territories occupied by Jordan and Egypt. For Palestinians, it symbolized dispossession and the loss of their homeland. The agreements failed to address fundamental issues, leaving a legacy of unresolved tensions. The partition of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, sacred to Jews, Christians and Muslims, became a focal point of conflict. The Green Line separated the western part under Israeli control from the eastern part under Jordanian administration. Families were separated, communities fractured, and access to holy sites restricted. The old city became a symbol of the unresolved conflict. The partition deepened the emotional and religious dimensions of the conflict. Section 3. Uneasy Truce, the Fragile Armistice and its Aftermath. The 1949 Armistice Agreements ended large-scale fighting but did not bring peace. It was an uneasy truce, a fragile ceasefire. The underlying causes of the conflict remained unaddressed. The region remained a tinderbox with potential for renewed conflict. The hastily drawn armistice lines became a source of tension. Border skirmishes and cross-border raids became commonplace. The unresolved status of Palestinian refugees added complexity. The UN played a crucial role in monitoring the armistice. However, their efforts for lasting peace proved futile. The ongoing tensions set the stage for future confrontations, including the Six-Day War of 1967. The Palestinian exodus of 1948, known as the Nakba, meaning catastrophe. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War resulted in a humanitarian crisis, displacing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The Nakba represents forced displacement and dispossession from ancestral homes. It is a narrative of loss, trauma, and ongoing struggle for recognition and justice. The events of 1948 shattered Palestinian society, leaving deep scars. Many fled in fear, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. Others were expelled by Israeli forces, their homes confiscated. The scale of displacement created a refugee crisis that continues today. The Nakba is a living reality, shaping Palestinian identity and their struggle for rights. Life in exile. The Palestinian refugee camps. In 1948, Palestinian refugees fled to neighboring countries like Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and the Gaza Strip. Many ended up in overcrowded camps, lacking basic amenities. These camps became long-term homes, symbolizing their ongoing struggle. Life was marked by hardship and uncertainty. Families lived in cramped quarters, often sharing makeshift shelters. Access to clean water and healthcare was limited. Despite challenges, they maintained their cultural identity and hope. UNRWA provided essential services but faced resource constraints. The camps became centers of culture and political activism. Shared experiences forged a strong sense of community and resilience. The right of return, a central demand of the Palestinian struggle. The right of return, the demand of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes from which they were displaced in 1948, lies at the heart of the Palestinian struggle. It is a fundamental principle enshrined in international law, specifically Resolution 194 of the United Nations General Assembly. For Palestinians, the right of return is not just a legal claim, it is deeply personal, linked to their identity and history. Israel, however, has consistently rejected the right of return, arguing it would demographically overwhelm the Jewish state. The Israeli government's refusal to recognize the right of return has been a major obstacle to achieving a peaceful resolution. The unresolved refugee issue continues to fuel resentment and mistrust, perpetuating the cycle of violence. Finding a just solution to the refugee issue is crucial for achieving a sustainable and peaceful future for the region. The rise of Arab nationalism. The aftermath of World War II witnessed a surge of nationalist sentiment across the Arab world. The decline of European colonial powers created a vacuum filled by a growing desire for self-determination among Arab nations. This burgeoning Arab nationalism, fueled by shared language, culture and history, became a powerful force in regional politics. The call for a unified Arab front against external threats, particularly Israel, resonated deeply with populations eager to forge their own destiny. The Palestinian cause became a rallying cry for Arab nationalists, further amplifying their message. The displacement of Palestinians in 1948 and the ongoing conflict with Israel became a symbol of Arab grievances. The rise of Arab nationalism marked a turning point in regional politics, setting the stage for future conflicts and alliances. Gamal Abdel Nasser, the charismatic leader of Egypt, emerged as a towering figure in the Arab nationalist movement. Nasser's rise to power in 1952 marked a turning point in Egyptian history and had a profound impact on the entire Arab world. His vision of a unified and independent Arab nation resonated deeply with populations across the region. Nasser's charisma and powerful rhetoric captivated audiences, transforming him into a beacon of Arab nationalism. He nationalized the Suez Canal in 1956, a bold move that defied Western powers and asserted Egyptian sovereignty. Nasser's advocacy for pan-Arabism further fueled the nationalist movement. His unwavering support for the Palestinian cause cemented his position as a leader of the Arab nationalist movement. Nasser's vocal support for the Palestinians and his condemnation of Israeli policies resonated deeply with Arab populations. The Suez Crisis of 1956 marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict, and cemented Gamal Abdel Nasser's status as a leading figure in the Arab world. The crisis erupted when Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, a vital waterway controlled by a British and French-owned company. Israel, fearing Nasser's growing influence, launched a military offensive into the Sinai Peninsula in collusion with Britain and France. The coordinated attack faced strong international condemnation, particularly from the United States and the Soviet Union. Despite the military setback, the Suez Crisis ultimately strengthened Nasser's position in the Arab world. His defiance of Western powers resonated deeply with Arab populations who saw him as a symbol of resistance. The crisis further solidified Nasser's image as a strong and independent leader. The Suez Crisis marked a turning point in the conflict, setting the stage for future confrontations. The seeds of Palestinian nationalism were sown in the fertile ground of dispossession and displacement. The Nakba of 1948, the exodus of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, became a defining moment in their collective consciousness. The experience of loss and exile fueled a growing sense of shared identity and a yearning for self-determination. The early expressions of Palestinian nationalism were diverse, reflecting the varied experiences of the Palestinian people. Despite differences, a common thread united them: the desire to reclaim their homeland. The denial of their right to return by Israel further fueled Palestinian nationalism. The right of return became a central demand of the Palestinian national movement. The rise of Arab nationalism in the 1950s and 60s provided a broader context for the development of Palestinian nationalism. The formation of the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, in 1964 marked a significant turning point in the Palestinian struggle for national liberation. The PLO emerged from a meeting of Arab leaders in Cairo, recognizing the need for a unified Palestinian voice. The creation of the PLO represented a move towards greater organization within the Palestinian movement. The PLO's charter, adopted in 1964, called for the liberation of Palestine and the establishment of a Palestinian state. The charter affirmed the right of return for Palestinian refugees and rejected the legitimacy of the State of Israel. Over time, the PLO increasingly asserted its independence, developing its own institutions and leadership structures. The formation of the PLO provided a platform for various Palestinian factions to come together. The PLO's ability to encompass diverse perspectives strengthened its position as the representative body of the Palestinian people. Yasser Arafat, the charismatic leader of Fatah, emerged as a prominent figure within the PLO. Arafat's leadership skills and commitment to armed struggle resonated deeply with many Palestinians. His rise to prominence within Fatah and his election as chairman of the PLO in 1969 marked a shift towards a more militant approach. Fatah, under Arafat's leadership, launched a series of guerrilla attacks against Israeli targets. These attacks served to demonstrate the PLO's commitment to armed struggle. Arafat's charisma helped to elevate the PLO's profile and garner support for their cause. The rise of armed resistance under Arafat's leadership marked a new phase in the Palestinian struggle. The PLO's actions, while controversial, resonated with many in the Arab world and beyond. The period leading up to the Six-Day War was marked by escalating tensions and increasing violence along Israel's borders. Palestinian Fedayeen launched guerrilla attacks from neighboring countries, targeting Israeli civilian and military installations. These raids provoked Israeli retaliation, creating a dangerous cycle of violence. The Fedayeen attacks represented growing frustration among Palestinians and a belief in armed struggle. Israel responded with military reprisals, often targeting neighboring Arab states. These strikes often resulted in civilian casualties and further fueled resentment. The disproportionate reprisals drew international criticism and inflamed regional tensions. The cycle of attack and reprisal pushed the region closer to all-out war. In May 1967, tensions escalated rapidly towards war. Egyptian President Nasser, emboldened by Soviet support, took actions perceived by Israel as threats. Nasser mobilized troops along Israel's border and expelled UN peacekeepers. He closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping. This vital waterway was Israel's access to the Indian Ocean. The blockade was seen as an act of war, threatening Israel's economy. Combined with other provocations, it pushed Israel closer to military action. Escalating tensions and the closure of the Straits of Tiran created a volatile situation. Israel, feeling threatened, considered a preemptive strike for self-defense. A swift military action was seen as a way to break the blockade and prevent an Arab attack. The decision reflected a sense of urgency and the belief that Israel's survival was at stake. Public opinion strongly supported a military response. The memory of the Holocaust fueled a determination to defend the Jewish state. External threats and internal pressures created a climate for military action. Arab states, while confident, were internally divided and unprepared. By early June 1967, the region stood on the brink of war. Diplomacy had failed, and both sides were preparing for confrontation. The world watched anxiously, fearing the consequences of a full-blown war. The Six-Day War would have a lasting impact on the Arab-Israeli conflict and the Middle East. Between 1949 and 1967, the Palestinian question became a central issue in the Middle East. The 1948 war left a legacy of displacement and unresolved grievances. The refugee crisis and division of Jerusalem made peace elusive. The PLO's formation marked a turning point in the Palestinian struggle. Under Arafat, the PLO embraced armed struggle, escalating tensions. Arab nationalism, led by Nasser, further complicated the situation. The unresolved Palestinian question became a source of instability internationally. The events of 1949 to 1967 laid the groundwork for the Six-Day War, transforming the Middle East. The unresolved Palestinian refugee crisis and the status of Jerusalem remain major obstacles to peace. The lack of mutual recognition and escalating tensions created a climate of mistrust. Extremist groups on both sides further complicated peace efforts. The legacy of this period continues to shape the conflict today. Addressing core issues is essential for a just and lasting peace. Resolving the Palestinian refugee crisis based on justice and equity is crucial. Mutual recognition and respect are key to sustainable peace. Promoting dialogue and empathy can break down barriers of mistrust. The international community must facilitate a peaceful resolution. Commitment and compromise are needed to address the root causes of the conflict.